Admiral Seojin Kim was having his morning coffee when the emergency alarm started screaming through the UN Dauntless. It was 3 in the morning, and he had been reviewing supply reports in his quiet captain's quarters. The red lights flashing across his desk told him this wasn't another drill. The communication screen flickered to life, showing the panicked face of Chancellor Vex from the Galactic Concorde. Behind him, Kim could see other alien representatives running around in complete chaos. Some were crying, others were shouting in languages he didn't recognize. The normally calm and dignified Galactic Council chamber looked like a disaster zone. All member species, Chancellor Vex announced with a shaking voice. We have received an ultimatum from forces claiming to represent the Vorthak Empire. They demand immediate and total surrender of all inhabited worlds within 72 standard hours. Kim nearly choked on his coffee. The Vorthak Empire, those guys had been dead for over 5,000 years. Every school kid in the galaxy learned about them in history class. The ancient warrior race that had conquered half the known universe before mysteriously disappearing. Most scholars thought they were just legends by now. Commander Minho Park burst through Kim's door without knocking, which was unusual for the normally polite officer. But instead of looking worried or scared like everyone else in the galaxy, Park was grinning from ear to ear. He was actually trying not to laugh out loud. "Sir, you need to see the tactical display," Park said, his voice barely steady. "These guys are serious. They've got massive ships and they're not playing around. The Outer Rim defense stations are already gone." Kim followed Park to the bridge, where Lieutenant Jiwoo Lee was monitoring communications from across the galaxy. The young officer looked amazed rather than frightened as she listened to the flood of messages coming in from every corner of known space. "The Centauri Federation is preparing to broadcast their surrender in 6 hours, Lee reported, shaking her head in disbelief. "The Altarian Republic has already started evacuating their border worlds. The Zephyrian Trade Union is offering to pay tribute, sir. Everyone is giving up without even trying to fight back." Kim looked at the main screen showing the enemy fleet. The Vorthak ships were enormous, each one bigger than a human city. They moved through space like dark metal mountains, bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. Their hulls were covered in ancient symbols that seemed to glow with their own evil light. These weren't the sleek, peaceful vessels that most galactic species used for trade and exploration. These were pure instruments of war. The communication channels were filled with terrified voices from every known species. The crystalline beings from Andromeda were singing their death songs. The plant-like creatures from the Vega system were already withering their leaves in surrender. Even the proud warrior clans of the Rigel sector were talking about honorable capitulation, but something strange was happening on the human ships. Instead of panic or fear, Kim could hear laughter echoing through the corridors of the Dauntless. Young officers were chatting excitedly about finally getting to use all those combat simulations they had been running for decades. The weapons crews were actually smiling as they powered up systems that hadn't been used in anger for 3 millennia. Park couldn't contain himself anymore and burst into full laughter. "Sir, do you realize what this means? We actually get to have a real war again. No more peace treaties, no more diplomatic meetings, no more sitting around watching the galaxy get boring. These Vorthak guys just gave us the best gift ever." Kim felt something he hadn't experienced in his 40 years of military service, pure excitement. For 3,000 years, humanity had maintained its military traditions, war colleges and combat training, while every other species had forgotten how to fight. Human children still played war games, while alien children played peace games. Human museums were full of weapons and battle tactics, while alien museums displayed art and philosophy. The rest of the galaxy had evolved beyond warfare, but humans had never forgotten that sometimes fighting was necessary. They had kept their warrior spirit alive through stories, games, and endless preparation for a day that everyone thought would never come. Kim walked to the communication console and opened a channel to the Vorthak flagship. The alien face that appeared on screen was terrifying. All fangs and glowing red eyes, with scars covering its reptilian features. This was clearly a being bred for war and conquest. "I am Admiral Seojin Kim of the United Earth Navy," he said, calmly. "We have received your surrender demand." The Vorthak commander leaned forward, expecting the usual begging and pleading they had received from every other species. You will submit to the glory of the Vorthak Empire, or your worlds will—" Burn Kim's response surprised everyone listening, including his own crew. He smiled broadly and said, "Thank you for finally giving us something interesting to do. We accept your challenge. Let's make this fun." The bridge of the Dauntless erupted in cheers. This was the moment humanity had been unconsciously preparing, for during 3,000 years of peace, Captain Hyok Nam was tending to his small garden on Luna when his old military communicator started beeping for the first time in 20 years. The retired officer had been enjoying his peaceful life, growing tomatoes and reading ancient history books in his little dome home on the moon's surface. At 73 years old, he thought his fighting days were long behind him. But when he saw the message flashing on his screen, his weathered hands started shaking with excitement. Official mobilization orders from Earth Command. After 3 decades of retirement, they were calling him back to active duty. The old captain's eyes lit up like a teenager getting his first starship license. Within hours, Luna City was buzzing with activity that no one had seen in generations. The Museum of Human Military History, usually visited by only a few tourists each month, suddenly had lines of people stretching around the block. Elderly veterans were pulling dusty uniforms from closets and checking if they still fit. Retired. Generals were dusting off their medals and calling old friends they hadn't spoken to in decades. The museum director, Dr. Jinwoo Chen, could barely keep up with the demand. People were asking to check out actual weapons and equipment that had been sitting behind glass for centuries. Ancient battle rifles, tactical computers, and even old-fashioned paper maps were being requisitioned by officers who remembered how to use them. "I never thought I'd see the day," Dr. Chen muttered as he watched Colonel Minji Seo, now 85 years old, expertly field strip a plasma rifle that had been a museum piece for 200 years. Her hands moved with the same precision she had shown as a young soldier, muscle memory intact after all these decades. Meanwhile, Major Sora Choi was deep underground in the Terra Defense Network Command Center, a facility that most people had forgotten even existed. She had been the duty officer for this system for 15 years, maintaining equipment that everyone assumed would never be used. While other species had dismantled their defense networks decades ago, Earth had kept theirs running, with the simple philosophy of just in case. The massive screens around her flickered to life, showing defensive positions around Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and dozens of other human colonies. Weapons platforms that had been in sleep mode for millennia were powering up. Orbital defense stations were running system checks. The entire human defense grid was awakening like a sleeping giant. "All systems green," Choi reported to her superiors, unable to hide the excitement in her voice. "We've got full coverage of the inner system, and the outer ring fortifications are coming online now." What amazed everyone was how quickly everything was working. While other species' military equipment had broken down from neglect, human technology was running perfectly. Every ship, every weapon, every communication system had been maintained and tested regularly. Human engineers had spent thousands of years keeping war machines in perfect condition, even though they hoped never to use them. The real surprise came from the war colleges scattered across human space. The Academy on Mars, the Strategic Institute on Europa, and the Tactical School on Titan suddenly became the busiest places in the galaxy. Students who had been studying theoretical battles and ancient military history were now getting ready for the real thing. Professor Do-Hyun Park at the Mars Academy had been teaching the same courses for 30 years. The Battle of Wolf 359, the Siege of Vega, the Great Retreat from Rigel. His students usually took notes and wrote papers about these historical conflicts. Now they were downloading actual battle plans and tactical manuals that their great-great-grandparents had written. The Siege of Vega manual was downloaded over 10 million times in the first hour, Professor Park announced to his class of excited cadets. "These aren't just history lessons anymore, people. These are your instruction manuals." Young officers were pulling out textbooks that covered everything from space combat to planetary assault. Books that had been gathering dust were suddenly the most important documents in human space. Students were calling their grandparents, asking for stories about battles that had seemed like ancient history just days before. Captain Yuna Kim, who had been teaching at the Titan facility, found herself surrounded by eager young faces, asking questions about real combat. "Professor, how do you actually board an enemy ship? What's it like when plasma bolts are flying? At you? Do you really feel scared during battle?" The most incredible thing was watching the older veterans come back to life. Men and women who had seemed tired and retired suddenly had spring in their step again. They were sharing war stories, comparing old battle scars, and teaching young officers tricks they had learned decades ago. While alien species across the galaxy were panicking and surrendering, humans were having the time of their lives. Veterans, who hadn't smiled in years, were grinning like children. Military equipment that had been called obsolete was proving to be perfectly functional. War colleges were working overtime to prepare a new generation of fighters. The human military machine was waking up from its long sleep, and it was hungry for action. The Battle of Kepler 442 started like any other space engagement, but it ended, up being talked about in military academies for centuries afterward. Commander Yuna Song was leading a small human patrol fleet when they ran straight into a massive Vorthak armada. 50 enormous enemy warships surrounded her 3 little destroyers. Like wolves circling wounded prey, any sane military commander would have tried to run or called for backup. Song did neither. Instead, she opened a communication channel to the Vorthak fleet commander and actually thanked him for showing up. "This is Commander Song of the UEN Defiant," she announced cheerfully. "I have to thank you for providing us with the best tactical challenge we've had in generations. This is going to be so much fun." The Vorthak commander, a massive reptilian creature named Thrakmor, was completely confused. In his 300 years of conquest, no enemy had ever thanked him for attacking them. Most species begged for mercy or tried to negotiate. Humans were definitely different. What happened next became the stuff of legend. Song's ship had already taken heavy damage from the initial Vorthak assault. The Defiant was leaking atmosphere, her main engines were failing, and half her weapons were offline. Any normal commander would have considered the ship a total loss, but Song saw opportunity where others saw disaster. She ordered her crew to deliberately blow out the damaged sections of their ship, creating a cloud of metal debris around them. Then she used the gravity well of a nearby planet to slingshot the wreckage directly into the Vorthak formation. "Watch this," Song said calmly to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Curie O. "Grandpa used to tell me stories about the old days when human pilots would ram enemy ships. We're going to do the same thing, but with style." The chunk of twisted metal from the Defiant's hull smashed into the lead Vorthak dreadnought like a massive bullet. The impact was so precise that it took out the enemy ship's main reactor, causing a chain reaction that disabled 3 more vessels. Song had turned her own damaged ship into a weapon, but she wasn't done yet. Using the confusion caused by the debris strike, Song executed what military historians would later call the impossible pincer. Her 2 remaining destroyers split up and attacked the Vorthak fleet from opposite sides, using the wreckage of their own mothership as cover. The Vorthak ships were huge and powerful, but they were also slow and clumsy. Song's smaller vessels danced around them like hummingbirds attacking elephants. Every move was calculated, every shot perfectly placed. Within 2 hours, the entire Vorthak armada was either destroyed or fleeing back to their own territory. What made the battle even more remarkable was Song's running commentary throughout the entire fight. She kept an open channel to the enemy fleet, offering tactical advice and pointing out their mistakes in real time. "Your formation is too tight," she told the Vorthak commander during the heat of battle. "You're making it easy for us to hit multiple targets with splash damage. Try spreading your ships out more next time." When a Vorthak cruiser attempted a flanking maneuver, Song actually applauded their effort. "Nice try with that left hook, but you telegraphed it about 30 seconds too early. Your engine signature gave you away." The strangest part was that the Vorthak were actually listening to her advice. After the battle, captured enemy communications showed that Vorthak officers were taking notes on Song's suggestions and passing them up their chain of command. This gave Fleet Admiral Taejin Bay a brilliant idea. If the Vorthak wanted military advice, humans would be happy to provide it. Bay started something that became known as the Galactic Military Review, real-time analysis and scoring of every major battle in the war. Bay set up a live broadcast channel that covered every engagement between human and Vorthak forces. He would watch the battles as they happened and provide expert commentary like a sports announcer calling a football game. But instead of commenting on touchdowns and penalties, he was analyzing tactical formations and weapon deployment. "The Vorthak 7th Fleet is showing much better discipline today," Bay would announce during a battle near the Rigel system. "Their approach vector is clean, and they're maintaining proper spacing between capital ships. I'm giving them a B+ for formation flying, though they're still weak on their defensive screen deployment." The broadcast became incredibly popular, not just with humans, but with Vorthak commanders who found themselves obsessively checking their ratings after every battle. Enemy fleet admirals started making tactical decisions based on what they thought would earn them higher scores from human military critics. Captain Yuna Kim took this psychological warfare to the next level with her courtesy engagement doctrine. Before every battle, she would open communications with the enemy fleet and spend several minutes genuinely complimenting their ships, their formations, and their tactical approach. "Good morning, Vorthak fleet," Kim would begin each engagement. "I have to say, your new dreadnought design is absolutely beautiful. The weapon placement is inspired, and that hull configuration is both elegant and functional. Now shall we begin our dance?" Her polite, respectful tone completely threw off enemy commanders who were expecting threats and battle cries. Instead, they got detailed critiques of their military hardware and genuine appreciation for their craftsmanship. The psychological impact was devastating. Vorthak warriors who had spent their entire lives being feared and hated found themselves desperately craving approval from their human opponents. Lieutenant Colonel Doyun Jang had always been a bit of a showman. During peacetime, he had hosted military history documentaries and taught strategy courses that were surprisingly popular with civilian audiences. When the war with the Vorthak began, Jang saw an opportunity to take his educational broadcasting to a whole new level. From his command center on Europa, Jang launched what he called the Galactic Military Performance Institute. It started as a simple idea: provide real-time analysis of battles to help human forces learn from each engagement. But it quickly became something much more entertaining and psychologically devastating to the enemy. Every major battle was now covered like a sporting event. Jang had a team of retired generals, tactical experts, and even former Vorthak prisoners of war who provided commentary during live engagements. They would analyze everything from ship formations to weapon choices, giving detailed explanations of what was working and what wasn't. And here we see the Vorthak 3rd Assault Fleet attempting their signature Hammer of Doom formation, Jang would announce, as plasma fire lit up space around the Tau Ceti system. "Notice how they're clustering their heavy cruisers in the center. Classic Vorthak doctrine, but they're leaving their flanks exposed to human destroyer squadrons." The broadcasts were incredibly detailed. Jang's team would pull up historical data, compare current tactics to previous battles, and even interview human pilots immediately after engagements. They treated each battle like a chess match, breaking down every move and explaining why certain decisions were brilliant or foolish. What nobody expected was how popular these broadcasts became with the Vorthak themselves. Enemy commanders started watching the human military analysis shows religiously. They would record every episode and study them in their ready rooms. Some Vorthak officers even began requesting specific human critics to cover their battles. Admiral Grakthul of the Vorthak 5th Fleet actually sent a formal message to Jang's institute, asking if Professor Curie Nam, a retired human tactical expert, could cover his upcoming assault on the Mars defense grid. "Her analysis of our previous engagement was most educational," the message read. "We request her expert commentary for our next operation." This gave Captain Ariam Park an even more twisted idea. If the Vorthak wanted human attention and feedback, why not give them exactly what they were asking for? Park launched what became known throughout the galaxy as the Care Package Program. Park's ship, the UN Harmony, began making special deliveries to Vorthak vessels after battles. But instead of weapons or supplies, they were dropping off gift baskets filled with human snacks, military textbooks, and handwritten notes of encouragement. The first package was delivered to the Vorthak cruiser, Death Shadow. after a particularly intense battle near Jupiter. Along with some Earth chocolate and coffee, Park included a note that read, "Thanks for bringing back the golden age of warfare. We were getting really bored with all that peace. Your tactical approach in today's engagement showed real creativity, though your boarding tactics could use some work. Keep practicing." The Vorthak crew was completely baffled. In their entire military tradition, no enemy had ever sent them gifts and constructive criticism. The ship's captain, Warlord Vex Moore, actually called a meeting to discuss the package. With his officers, they spent 3 hours analyzing the note and trying to understand what boarding tactics could use some work meant. More packages followed. Park sent tactical manuals to Vorthak commanders who showed promise, congratulatory messages to fleets that performed well, and even sympathy cards to ships that had been badly damaged in combat. Each package came with detailed feedback on the enemy's performance, written in the same tone a teacher might use when grading a student's homework. "Your use of plasma torpedoes in yesterday's engagement was inspired," read one note. "The timing was perfect, and your target selection showed real strategic thinking. However, your follow-up assault was too hasty. Next time, consider consolidating your position before advancing. Keep up the good work." The psychological impact was incredible. Vorthak warriors who had spent their entire lives trying to inspire fear and terror were now desperately seeking approval from their human enemies. They started making tactical decisions based on what they thought would earn them positive feedback from human military critics. But the real breaking point came when humans began treating the entire war like a sporting competition. Commander Wonjin Lee, who had been a sports broadcaster before joining the military, started publishing daily Vorthak power rankings that rated enemy fleets based on their performance. Lee's rankings became the most popular entertainment program in human space, and somehow Vorthak commanders were watching them too. Every morning Lee would release his updated list of the top 10 Vorthak fleets, complete with detailed analysis of their strengths and weaknesses. Moving up 3 spots. "This week we have Admiral Thrakvon's 7th Assault Group," Lee would announce cheerfully. Their performance in the Centauri engagement was really impressive. Great coordination between their capital ships and fighter squadrons. They're definitely ones to watch. Vorthak fleet commanders found themselves obsessively checking their ratings every day. Officers who dropped in the rankings would spend days analyzing what they had done wrong. Those who moved up would celebrate with their crews and try even harder to impress the human critics. The most surreal moment came when Warlord Supreme Gorth Mal, the overall commander of the Vorthak invasion, sent an official complaint to Commander Lee about his ranking methodology. "The point system you use does not adequately account for tactical innovation," the message read. "We request a formal review of our recent performance evaluations." Humans had turned warfare into entertainment, and their enemies had become willing participants in their own psychological defeat. The end of the war came in the most unexpected way possible. Instead of a final, desperate battle or a crushing defeat, it ended with the Vorthak Empire formally requesting a meeting to discuss peace terms. Not because they were losing, their ships were still powerful, their armies still vast, but because they were completely confused about what kind of enemy they were fighting. Admiral Seojin Kim received the message at his command post on Luna. The formal diplomatic communication was unlike anything in Vorthak military history. Instead of demands for surrender or threats of destruction, it was almost polite. The Vorthak Empire requests a formal audience with human leadership to discuss the cessation of hostilities, the message read. "We wish to understand your unique approach to warfare and explore mutually beneficial arrangements." Kim couldn't help but laugh when he read it. In 6 months of fighting, humans had managed to turn a galactic invasion into what looked like a job interview. 3 days later, the largest Vorthak diplomatic vessel ever built approached Earth's orbital space. The massive ship, called the Eternal Conquest, was big enough to hold a small city. Its hull was covered in the battle scars and conquest trophies from 1,000 different worlds. This was a ship that had accepted the surrender of entire civilizations. But as it approached Earth, the Vorthak crew saw something they had never encountered before. Instead of defensive positions or weapons pointed at their ship, they found themselves surrounded by celebration decorations. Massive banners hung in space reading, "Thank you for the best war ever," And welcome to Earth, worthy opponents. The docking bay of Lunar Station had been decorated like a party venue. Streamers, balloons, and even a red carpet had been laid out for the Vorthak delegation. Human officers stood at attention, but they were smiling and applauding rather than looking grim or defeated. Warlord Supreme Thraxul, the supreme commander of the Vorthak invasion force, walked down the ramp of his shuttle, expecting to see cowering diplomats begging for mercy. Instead, he was greeted by Admiral Kim, holding a bouquet of flowers and wearing a genuine smile. "Welcome to Earth, Warlord Supreme," Kim announced cheerfully. "We've been looking forward to meeting you in person. You've given us the most interesting 6 months we've had in 3,000 years. Thraxul, a massive reptilian warrior who stood nearly 8 feet tall and was covered in ritual battle scars, found himself completely speechless. In his 3 centuries of conquest, no one had ever given him flowers or thanked him for invading their territory. The formal negotiations took place in the Grand Assembly Hall on Luna, but they felt more like a friendly academic conference than a peace treaty discussion. Minister Jihye Sung, Earth's chief diplomatic representative, opened the talks with a presentation titled "What We Learned from Our Vorthak Friends," a 6-month military education program. Honored Vorthak delegates, Minister Sung began, "We want to start by expressing our sincere gratitude for the incredible learning opportunity you've provided us. Your innovative tactics and strategic thinking have revolutionized human military doctrine." Thraxul shifted uncomfortably in his specially built chair. "We came here expecting to discuss your surrender terms," he rumbled in his deep, gravelly voice. "We expected you to beg for mercy or offer tribute. Instead, you're giving us academic presentations." Minister Sung looked genuinely surprised. "Surrender? Oh my, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We thought you came here to discuss the exchange program we've been developing. Haven't you been enjoying our military analysis broadcasts and performance reviews?" The truth slowly came out during the negotiations. The Vorthak Empire had never encountered an enemy like humanity. Every other species they had conquered had responded with fear, desperation, or hopeless resistance. Humans had responded with enthusiasm, constructive criticism, and genuine appreciation for Vorthak military skills. "We expected terror," Thraxul confessed during a private dinner with the human delegation. "We expected your people to flee in panic when they saw our ships. Instead, your commanders started giving us tactical advice and rating our performance like we were students in some kind of military academy." Captain Kyuri O, who had been promoted to Director of Interspecies Military Exchange, nodded sympathetically. "I can understand how that might be confusing, but you have to understand. We've been studying warfare for 3,000 years with no one to practice against. You gave us the chance to test everything we'd learned. It was like Christmas morning for our entire military." The negotiations continued for 3 days, but they were unlike any peace talks in galactic history. Instead of arguing about territories or reparations, the humans kept offering jobs to the Vorthak delegation. Professor Minho Park from the Mars War College made a formal presentation offering tenured teaching positions to any Vorthak officers who wanted them. "Your multidimensional assault tactics completely changed our understanding of modern warfare," he explained enthusiastically. "We'd love to have you join our faculty and help train the next generation of human officers." Commander Jinwoo Seo, who had been studying Vorthak ship designs, offered to set up a joint engineering program. "Your weapon systems are absolutely brilliant," he said. "We could learn so much from each other. Think of the innovations we could develop together." The final treaty was signed in a ceremony that looked more like a graduation than a surrender. The Vorthak delegation received honorary degrees from the Terran Defense Academy, along with offers to establish permanent exchange programs between human and Vorthak military institutions. "The annual Galactic War Games will begin next year," Minister Sung announced as the treaty was signed. "We're hoping you'll participate as our honored guests and primary competitors. It wouldn't be nearly as much fun without you." As the Vorthak delegation prepared to leave Earth, Warlord Supreme Thraxul pulled Admiral Kim aside for a private conversation. "In 300 years of conquest," the massive alien warrior said quietly, "no one has ever made us feel welcome. No one has ever appreciated our skills or offered to learn from us. We came here to destroy you, and instead you've given us friendship and respect." Kim smiled and shook the alien's massive, clawed hand. "That's what humans do. We turn every challenge into an opportunity, every enemy into a potential friend, and every war into a learning experience. The galaxy would never be the same again."